Well, thank you for having me. This feels like a very natural, I guess, shift in topic. Um, I, I'm Dr. Karen Ferguson. I obviously failed to put my name on my slide, so check one. And what I'd like to do is share with you how recognition for prior learning impacted me at a personal level, and then subsequently a professional level. So I'm not your typical PhD. I kind of call myself a blue collar doctorate. My parents always expected me to go to college. They always told me I was going to go to college. I did pretty good in school, but I didn't know I needed to apply to college. So I did well in school, but I wasn't good enough or bad enough to necessarily get the attention of a high school counselor. So I missed everything. It was April when other people were getting accepted to college that I realized I missed something. But I was honestly thinking more about joining the military straight out of high school anyway. Um, Conversations with my parents then led to, no, you're going to college. But obviously no savings plan. I didn't know Pell existed, all of the things. So I was an 18-year-old bartending and going to community college. Those two things, that also shows you how old I am. I was bartending at 18. But those two things together obviously didn't lead to success. So after demonstrating complete and utter failure at attempting to go to college, I went ahead and joined the military in 1994. Um, Everywhere I went, in the military, as you guys know, every duty station is different. Every experience is different. Every time I went someplace, I found a new college. I knew I needed to have a degree. So I just always took classes. And I collected a number of classes over the same years that I was, collecting clinical leadership, operational leadership, management, human resources experience, performance management experience. I also was teaching in the phase 2 for my MOS. But all along the way, I just didn't know how to put all of that together. And I didn't know how any of it would apply. So I had all of these transfer credits, all of this experience, no degree. And then I found a program that really looked at me and just said, this counts. And the validation, I'm sorry, I didn't think this was going to happen. The validation that that gave me was huge. It changed how I looked at myself. It changed how I thought about my ability to complete my degree. It changed everything about how I looked at my future. So when I was stationed at Madigan Army Medical Center, by then I had about 6 to 7 years of experience in the military. I was an E6. I heard about a program on the Air Force Base next to me that was run by University of Illinois at Carbondale. They had an extension campus on the base, and they evaluated prior learning credit. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. And I would say to this date, looking back, it's probably still one of the most comprehensive approaches that I've seen, but they took a look at all of my previous credits, my training, my work experience before the military, during the military. And at the end of that, I had a plan that was a path to degree completion. There was a light at the end of my tunnel. It was not a train, it was a degree. And for those of you who have worked with adult students, you know that once we get a plan, we finish our plan, right? Once we know exactly what to do, we're going to get it done. And so I did. I earned my bachelor's degree in workforce education and development at 28. Then I got my master's degree at 30, and I finished my PhD at 32. And I can honestly say that at 18, I didn't even know what a PhD was. And it was one institution's willingness to take a holistic approach to me and my prior learning that changed that trajectory for me. And so after completing my PhD, I transitioned out of the military and into academia. My first experience teaching was at the University of Louisville, which is an R1. And over time, I just realized that traditional higher education just wasn't filling my cup. And so I transitioned into a career working with non-traditional students, focused primarily on adults, but not always, but very clearly focused on students who just don't have the knowledge or the access to finish a degree. And that focus has been very intentional for me because I know how important access is to non-traditional pathways and just the huge multi-generational socioeconomic impact that that can have. So as I worked up the ladder from faculty to dean to VP up to provost, I saw a lot of different approaches to PLA. And the one consistent thing that I saw, where there's two consistent things. One, nothing was consistent. And two, it was difficult, right? Every institution had, in the US at least, right, has a different policy on prior learning assessment. Some you can take it before you start. Some you have to complete an entire semester. Some it's included in transfer evaluation. Some it's coming at a fee. Some of them you have to register at any class to earn prior learning assessment. So you're going to pay tuition so that you can not pay tuition. So it's a very complicated process. It's different everywhere. But everywhere there was this, it was just really difficult, right? Students don't always know about it. Then it's very much a manual review. It's a time-intensive process. It's slow. Oftentimes there's inconsistent standards. One faculty member may look at something and think it's worthy of college credit. Another faculty member could potentially look at the same exact portfolio and decide that it's not worth college credit. There's just those inconsistencies among faculty, among disciplines, and among institutions. And rightfully so, you know, faculty, a lot of schools do charge for prior learning assessment because it is resource intensive, right? There is definitely kind of a cognitive overload if you're trying to look at an entire portfolio, whether it's paper or digital, regardless of the format. If you're trying to make sense of all of that and take it back to a college catalog and figure out what college credit it's worth, that it's messy and it's difficult. And that really leads to, you know, just an inability to scale the processes. Fewer students are served than are eligible. And we really just aren't making that impact for the students that have, like what Nan talked about, you know, 43 million adults with some college, you know, degree. And that doesn't count the millions who have work experience and no degree. So we're really not serving the biggest potential student body that we have and the ability to serve them. So in 2020, I co-founded Education Assessment System as an attempt to scale this solution. We've automated the intake process. It's a holistic review. So students enter in all of their work experience. We do collect resumes, but that's supplemental information. We have them filling out questionnaires and filling out information that's important to the institution. When they've completed that, we really talk about our AI model as a translator. We're going to translate that person's experience into recommendations for college credit. So we're kind of Netflixing PLA in that first step and saying, hey, your background looks like you might be eligible for these particular classes. And then based off of those recommendations, there's a lot of different things faculty can do, but typically the next step is they take a look at that and send those classes back to the students, and the students then have an opportunity to validate that they learned what they would have learned in the class. So we're not recommending credit for experience, but we're aligning the experience to potential credit and then providing an opportunity for the student to then demonstrate that they did learn, right? It's that demonstration of knowing. So the validation phase, that again goes through our algorithm. And then after that, there's a number of, you know, different workflows for faculty and administrators to review, request edits. They can send things back and forth to the student. And one of the things that was important to us as we built this is that it could fit any institution's policy and process, right? We know better than to think we're going to change 4,000 institutions' approaches to PLA. In an ideal world, this would sit right up front with transfer credit, and a student would have one degree plan and they would know what they needed to do so that they could finish. The reality of that, as we work with institutions of all different shapes and sizes, is that doesn't fit every institution's policy or mission. So it was important to us that we could put this anywhere in the student life cycle that would allow an institution to serve more students in this way. So really our goal is to take what for a lot of students is a lucky discovery, right? They're poking around the website and they find a link to something and turn that into a systematic and accessible pathway for all of these students who want to complete a degree and just don't have time for 4 straight years, but have a whole lot of experience that's worth looking at. So I guess, my perspective as I look at this is it's hugely impactful. There are a lot of different ways to look at this. What the lens that I try to look at it is, what is the impact? What's the impact of an individual and what's the impact of a society? And for me, that's turning a daughter of a waitress into a PhD who's been a provost and an interim president. That's what RPL can do. It can truly change the trajectory of someone's career. So looking at that full circle and not just thinking about, the process or the one person that we can serve, but the ripple effect that one person that you serve might have on multiple people around them and the generations around them. So a little bit of a redundant question, I think, for this group, but the question that we need to be asking our peers and the rest of education is, are we forcing students to pay for and repeat what they've already mastered in the field? Why? Why are we still doing this? We've got to rethink the validation process. We have to scale the access to it so that we can serve more students, so that we can continue to just have a positive impact on students across all different types of socioeconomic statuses. And Dawn, that's it for me. And I'm notorious for getting people back on schedule.
That's good. Good for you. Actually, yeah, the time for starting the questions is similar to Nan, actually. So
Yeah.
I think we have a bit of room to explore this a bit further. And thank you very much for that very human depiction of personal impact, and then how you basically are working to give back. So I think that's awesome. Again, I always have questions, but I want to give other people a chance to raise their hand, or maybe drop something into the chat. But maybe what I'll kick off asking about is, one of the things that's always bugged me about RPL is that you can know and do stuff, and it can even be at a certain level of, a qualifications framework, in terms of complexity, breadth, and depth. But if it's not in a program, you're out of luck. So how do you see sort of solving that issue? In other words, you have people who know what they have what they know and can do, and it's complex, it's rich, etc. But there's not a program to match it to.
Yeah, I really think we are starting to see schools. Purdue is an example. They're working to really cater their programs so that there is a variety of things. And I think there's a couple of different ways that I look at that. One is, it's how do you extrapolate the core learning, right? Every higher ed's supposed to teach people how to think critically. Employers need critical thinkers, right? But that critical thinking applies across disciplines. So one of the examples that I use a lot about my frustration about this is, when I was a provost, we were looking at a E7 nuclear submarinist and arguing over what kind of math he should have. I think he could out math everybody in the room, right? So if you just took his job specialty, there really wasn't a degree plan that uniquely aligned to that. But when you extrapolate his learning and combine that with what he wants to do, the application of that learning into something novel was very easily demonstrated. So I think it's really about, how do we look at the whole person? How do we meet them where they are? And then figure out how it fits, right? It's nice when a circle fits in a circle. But sometimes when we really extrapolate the learning in all the different ways people have talked about today, you can find alignments that may not necessarily be clear if you just look at them at face value.
So are you saying that for example, an institution like Purdue might do a bit of sort of customization of a program for a person like that E7 person?
Yep, they have some really neat programs that they're coming out with where they're really partnering either with different employers or with the military in different specialty areas to figure out how to cater the programs so that they really meet the needs of that local area. So, if you take out kind of the military example, if you're in an economic area where there's a need for certain positions and you have employers at the ready and you can modify your programs to fit the economic need, then you can really recognize that and apply that in the ways that make sense within the bounds of your degree.
Okay. So custom programs, say for contract training. So in other words, this employer or group of employers needs something. Let's do something that has credit value, but it also fits their specific needs.
I think it can be that, and it can also be the other way, right? We're in a market that has these, I can't think of the word right now, but like they're important employers to the local economy. And so you see a lot of the same knowledge and skills coming out of these employers. How do you partner with them so that you're taking that into a degree that's going to help them move their employees forward, while you can also save on, the tuition reimbursement dollars when the colleges can recognize the learning that's occurred in that particular workplace. And you can build those partnerships through so that they're kind of self-sustaining.
Okay. I'll pass the eagle feather over to Serge.
Uh, yes, a very interesting presentation. I was wondering, are you aware of Clock, Denise Stanley, and the work she does? Because what I feel with RPL, it's often, as Don mentioned, is to align people with existing qualifications. How about if we have in Europe, for example, we have the European qualification framework, we have 8 levels, and why not recognize people at, let's say, level 6 with their own qualification, their own degree, it would bearing their own name. Is it something that you would consider?
I mean, I would think so. I also have to admit I'm not hugely informed on the systems in Europe, but when I think about like those types of levels, there's the common skills and critical thinking that comes across, right? And so that you can apply those. And one of the things that I find extremely important is let's go ahead and do that, but let's also not use prior learning as an excuse to fill out an elective bucket, right? Let's really find that alignment to degree completion so that you're getting the degree. It's meaningful credit. It's not just elective credit. It's something that actually applies to the degree plan.
But it is for an existing degree. Would you consider creating a customized degree?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I dropped a link for Clock Your Skills.
Thank you.
Denise Stanley keynoted actually at an epic a few years back. I'm trying to remember which year, but it's worth a look. It's quite interesting, bouncing back and forth from education into industry, focused initially on the music industry. Okay, I think we've come to time again. It's amazing how that time flies.